Hi guys, this is Shannon from Reptile and welcome back to our channel. Today we have an exciting build video for you and it's all to do with this little fella, Squiggle, who's a baby green tree python who needs a bit of an enclosure upgrade when it comes to the size. So we're going to show you how we built this stunning enclosure behind me here, and it's got a few little interesting things that you may not have seen on YouTube. We've got a waterfall, but a raised water hole that the waterfall trickles into. We've got removable perches, which is great for green tree pythons, and so much more. So let's dive into this video. So this is the enclosure that I actually got off Facebook for 50 bucks, but these are the exact dimensions and what type of enclosure it is. But first of all, I'm going to start off with giving a good thorough clean on the inside, making sure it's bone dry, and then we can begin our build. So I'm trying to figure out this raised waterhole waterfall situation. So I'm just making sure I measure everything out. I'm using that insulation foam board from Bunnings to, I guess, be the main platform that I'm going to build that waterhole on, and I'm just going to mark bits of it out with my finger, and then I can cut it outside the enclosure, and it can be cut with a knife quite easily. So now I'm just using this aquarium grade silicone, and I'm just going to silicone it in place, and this is totally Reptile safe, this particular silicone, and it's pretty strong as well. So next up, we've got these nice thick plastic plant pots, and I wanted to go with a thick plastic so they're going to last forever, they're not going to crack. And I'm just drilling some drainage holes in, and I'm going to silicone them in place and make sure that silicone sets completely before I do any type of spray foaming to spray foam it into, I guess, the future rock feature. Now I do want to increase the size of that water hole, so I'm just using some more insulation foam sheets to do that and silicone it in place. But this is all the materials you're going to need to create this waterfall. And we're going to cut it all to size. Now with the PVC piping, you really just sort of play Lego with it when you're at Bunnings to sort of get a rough idea of the shape. And yeah, but anyway, we've cut this particular bit to size, but it's a bit rough, so we need to get some sandpaper to sand it down. And then we're gonna, I guess, connect all these bits of PVC pipes, and this is gonna be the structure that you're gonna thread your piping through, your, I guess, water tubing for the waterfall. So yeah, so you'll see what I mean in a second. So there's the particular, I guess, water piping we're going to use that is going to be attached to the pump. And again, using this PVC pipe to thread it through just means that if it gets damaged, you can easily remove it, pull it out, replace it, and even if the pump gets damaged, you can replace that. So this whole I guess the pump and the piping is all removable, replaceable. But here we go, we're testing it. That's the type of pump I did get. You can get it off of places like Amazon or eBay. But we're giving it a test and we're gonna thread it through, and now you're probably seeing what I mean. And yeah, so I was pretty happy when it actually worked. But now we need to silicone up that piping to make sure it's completely watertight, because we don't want water seeping into the structure if I guess that tubing gets damaged. But also when you're spray foaming this into the structure, this PVC piping, spray foam can get through the tiniest gaps, and I don't want it getting through those gaps and into that PVC pipe itself. Now I'm positioning that pipe where I want it. I was just testing with the pump to make sure the PVC pipe is in the right spots, and I'm just getting some of that multi-use insulation foam sheets just cut up into small bits to, I guess, prop the pipe up in a position that I want it, so that once I'm ready to spray foam, it is in the correct position, it's secured down. You want to make sure you've siliconed everything in place and the silicone is completely set before you do start the spray foaming, because the spray foaming has the power to move things around. Now what I'm doing is I'm using more of that those foam sheets cut up, and I'm creating a channel that I want to guide the spray foam through. So if I didn't do that, the spray foam will just spread out to the sides and not build up in that area where I want it to build up. So that's the method behind my madness there. And now we're beginning that spray foaming, I guess. This is quite a quick, fun process, the spray foaming. It can actually look really messy, so don't, I guess, get stressed out if you're like, oh my god, this looks horrible. You can carve things away, so it'll all be good in the end. Now, when it comes to the amount of spray foam cans you need, I think I may have used about 6 or so. And make sure that spray foam is set before you lift the enclosure up as well, and do the other sides or certain areas that you want to do. But this is the next day after that back wall has set, and now I'm working on that water hole. So I'm spray foaming up the sides that I'll eventually carve. I'm trying to stick to my vision. It's really hard to do, and I guess imagine what it's going to look like when you're in the early stages like this. But anyway, we're starting to carve part of it out. Now the carving is one of the biggest time consuming parts, but it's so important because this is the main foundation for your build, so you really want to take your time. Now I am making sure I'm digging out the water hole to make it deeper towards the back, so that water pump is always going to sit quite low in the water, so there's no chance of the water dropping and the pump's going to be exposed and it's going to, I guess, burn the pump out. But yeah, you want to make sure you carve that shiny top layer off the spray foam, and that's because if you leave that shiny layer on, the grout will actually flake off it, so you need to remove the entire shiny top layer of that spray foam. But now I'm carving around those planter pots, and I'm just sort of opening the planter pots back up, but still making sure they're hidden within that wall. But this is just going to allow me to put some nice big plants in there to, I guess, add to more coverage for the animal that I'm putting in here. But here we go, I'm again building those side walls up of that water hole, and I want the water hole walls to be quite high because I don't want water splashing out or trickling out. Waterfalls can be quite temperamental that way, and the water level can drop, so I'm just ensuring that that's not going to happen. But here we go with spray foaming the side walls, and again you want to make sure everything is completely set before you start tipping the enclosure on different angles, different sides to do that. Now we're doing the other side wall. It's a bit hard to guess where we're at with the enclosure flipping around a bit, but you'll see it once it's stood up and what the spray foaming looks like. So that's it without it carved. You can see there's a lot of that shiny coating. I'm not going to show you the whole carving process, but this is it completely carved. So you can clearly start to see all the features now. So this is what the build is sort of going to look like. You can already imagine it with it being carved out. Now I'm just testing to make sure my water pump and the water pump is sitting in that water hole quite nicely. It's also got a little light there. And I've carved some holes out in the rock feature itself, well, what's going to be the rock feature, so I can have removable perches, which are going to be branches that I've collected, I've cleaned over a few days and sanded them down and cut them to size, and yeah, I can easily remove them in and out of those walls because of the holes, and the holes do go into the rock feature quite a bit. Which makes them quite sturdy. They're not just going to pop out easily. But now we are doing all the precautions for the grouting. This is a messy process. So get your plastic coverings to cover up surfaces, and yeah, it's quite messy. But we've got all the things we need: some water, some soapy water, the grout there. This is the type of grout that I'm using, and also I've got lots of different sizes of paintbrushes that you saw before, but you want the grout to be a thick pancake consistency so it can fill in all those air holes. I'm just pouring it into a smaller container so I can put that in the enclosure, and it's just going to make it easier. But now I'm going to start off with these hard to reach spots, and I'm actually using that mirror so I can see where I'm grouting, because you can't really see it from above. So do all those tricky spots first, and then you can do the rest of the build. But yeah, again, a bit of a time consuming process. You want to make sure you cover everything, so take your time with this, make sure there's no surface left exposed. And I start off with a black grout layer as the first layer, and the reason why is when I get to the carving stage, if I do carve down and hit black, I know to stop because I'm going to hit foam soon. But you can see me swapping out the sizes of my brushes depending on where I'm grouting, and this is why you need a few different size brushes so you can get into all those nooks and crannies quite easily. I've seen people use gloves and just use their hands. For me personally, I think the brushes give a bit of a nicer finish when it comes to the end of it, but again, totally up to you what you want to use. Now this part of the waterfall, when it comes to the bottom of that PVC pipe, that was really hard to see, so this mirror trick is really good. That was my eyes for this, and again, this is just going to make sure this is going to be completely watertight. That PVC pipe is set into that spray foam, but there's going to be no spray foam exposed in any of those tricky spots. But we're continuing on with the grouting process, grouting every tiny little bit, and you may have to do this in stages as well, because again, very time consuming. So this is the first layer of grout finished, and again, the vision is starting to come to light. That's the second layer of grout done. And this is the third layer of grout. And the fourth layer. And then I did do more layers in other areas as well. But when it comes to your final layer of grout, you want to get it where it's almost dry, but it's a little bit damp to the touch, and that's when you can carve. If you do it too soon, it's all going to flake off if it's too damp, and if you wait too long where it's dry, it's going to be really hard to carve into. So I'm just following where I think those natural, I guess, cracks and the rock sort of wearing away is, and you can't really get this wrong because nature isn't perfect, rocks aren't perfect, so you don't want it to be so uniform and looking so symmetrical. Just follow where the grooves are in the rock and carve that, and that should be able to give you enough guidance of what you need. But again, don't try to make it so perfect, which our mind does. So do carve, I guess, the cracks going in all different directions, and yeah, can't really go wrong. And to carve it out, you can use a knife or anything sharp that will work. I think one time I didn't have a knife, so I used like a sharpened chopstick. So yeah, just go with what you have at home. But now we're cleaning up, I guess, all the grout that's sort of flaked off from the carving. And as you're going through this build, you really do want to clean up as you go along, and it's just going to eventually make for a really nice clean finish and to have a sanitary enclosure. But I'm just using the knife to get up any bits of grout that are stuck to that glass that I don't want there. And that's what it's looking like after the grouting and carving process. It's really starting to look a little bit more natural, a little bit more like a rock feature. And now I'm just touching up that bottom with some grout too, again just so it's going to look nice and fresh. Now not everyone grout spray foams to the bottom if you're going to have a bioactive enclosure. I just do it just in case I don't want soil at the bottom and I'm going to have a simple substrate. But now we're getting to the spray painting. So simple spray bottle, water, and put some paint in of whatever colour. Use acrylic paint, which is a safe water-based paint. And here I'm just using a bit of like a sunburnt brown, which looks really nice. But you can, with me in this build, I'm going to go a bit more to a deeper, darker, earthy brown. But if you want to go more this way and keep it, I guess, more sunburnt reds and have different coloured ochres like yellow, that could look really nice as well. The painting and the colours you use is totally up to you. Now I'm just going to go over with a bit of a darker brown, and I'm just adding black to this spray paint until it gets to the dark consistency that I want. So you can see I have to add more black and more black and more black until I get it right. And then I'm just going to spray it in areas where I think it might be slightly darker. But again, this is another thing, you can't really go wrong. And when you think you have gone wrong, sometimes it makes it look a little bit more natural. And just keep in mind too, you're going to have plants and things climbing up this whole rock feature to break this rock up. So things that you may think are a mistake won't actually be obvious when you've got the plants going through here, and the perches as well. But you can see this is really, really messy. There's a lot of spray paint on that bottom area and areas where it's pooling. So you will need to do a little bit of a tidy up as well. So cleaning the glass, and also when you are doing the spray painting, you're going to need to put plastic all around that enclosure, because when you spray it, it may spray out of the enclosure and onto the wall behind. So keep that in mind. But here we go, we're cleaning up all those areas again, just to make sure we're going to have a nice finish at the end. So I always clean as I go along, and that's all the spray painting done. You want to make sure this is completely dry before you go on to any of the next steps. And I've got some of this blue chuck cloths that I put in there, because that's an area where I don't really want there to be paint. I'm going to be grouting in those areas. And the planter pots, I don't really want any paint going in there. I just want it to be that plastic. And yeah, that's what it's starting to look like. So we've got the paint brushes there, paint ready for the dry brushing technique that we're going to be doing. But I'm just going to do a layer of grout in this pond. And again, where the water's going to be sitting, there will be just grout and obviously the waterproofing, but there's going to be no paint in that area where the water will be pooling. And we're going to start off when it comes to the dry brushing with the darkest colour. So the black we're going to use for shadowing. So I start off darker and then I get lighter. So we're going to sort of focus that black, that shadowing areas, I guess, where there's indents, the rocks going inwards, or there's cracks in the rocks, areas where you think there'll be a bit of darkness, a bit of shadows. You want to accentuate, I think that's the right word. And yeah, I guess it's going to make it pop more and give it more depth. And again, remember with the dry brushing technique, you want to make sure you've removed most of the paint off your brush, so you're not going to get blobs of black paints and spots. So it's really just to highlight areas, not to completely, I guess, black out a particular spot. And this particular area was really tricky, so I actually had to open the door in a certain way and get a little brush so I could, I guess, fill those really light areas in to make it blend. But now we're going to be doing sort of a darkish brown, and we're going to be dry brushing that into the rock feature. So you can see this is turning from a sunburnt red now more to, well, sunburnt browny red, more to like an earthy foresty brown, if you will, with those colors that I'm using. But now we're going to get into the lighter browns. So I'll go over with a somewhat lighter brown, then an even lighter brown, then pretty much white. I'll dry brush in areas that are really raised, where I think the wind's going to be ripping at it and it's going to make the rock really worn. So this highlighting really does start to bring the rock feature to life. It makes it, I guess you can tell the sun's been beating down on it. It's been worn over thousands and thousands of years. Yeah, that's what you want it to look like. That's what looks natural. That's what we see out in Australia with lots of rock features. And yeah, I think it adds quite a nice effect. And now I'm just doing another coat of grout in this waterhole. So this waterhole ends up having about 8 layers of grout, I'm pretty sure. And I don't think you'll actually see me do it in the video here, but I actually blend that grout upwards, up the side walls of that waterhole, to sort of blend it into the feature. Because as I said, where the water's sitting, I don't like to have paint, I just like to have grout. So you can start to see I've brought that grout up the inside walls of that waterhole. But it's starting to look quite nice, quite natural, quite earthy. I think it'll give it some rainforesty vibes once we put the plants in. But yeah, I'm quite liking how this is going, and I was a bit nervous when I decided to do a raised waterhole and waterfall. But now we're going to get onto the waterproofing. So you're going to need a lot of, I guess, those throwaway cloths to wipe up any excess. But we're starting off with that first layer. And again, take your time. You want to make sure you get this in all the spots you need to. And start from, I guess, the top of the structure and then work your way down. Because when you're doing the waterproofing with this pond sealer, it does drip down. So it's just going to make sure you're not going to waste as much, because if you start at the bottom, it's all just going to keep pulling towards the bottom. Or if you start at the top, it's going to sort of run down into spots where you're going to be working on. But now once you've done each layer, you're going to have to wipe up any excess pooling areas or where you don't want it to be, which is in those planter pots, or I guess on that bottom glass surface. But now what I'm doing is I decided I didn't just want a spout of water, I wanted the water to trickle down something. So I'm building, I guess, this rock feature. It's just all rock silicone together, so the water can trickle down it, and it's running water. Now, running water for lots of Australian reptiles, it will encourage your reptile to drink because they like moving water, and drinking moving water just gives them a less chance of potentially becoming unwell from drinking, I guess, really bad, disgusting water that isn't moving, that's stagnant. But now I wanted to add, I guess, a bit of flair to this waterhole now that I decided to have that rock feature that the water's going to trickle down. So I'm using all these like river pebble type things to decorate around that waterhole area. So I'm not really fussed that it doesn't look too natural. It's going to give the snake that's going in here, Squiggle, a lot of enrichment with the textures. Also having these rocks in here will assist with shedding. Squiggle can rub its body up against all the rocks to help shed a little bit easier. But you'll see me putting silicone down, and I'm literally sticking one rock at a time, and this is just going to ensure that each rock is secure, it's not going to fall off and it's pretty much going to stay there for life. Whereas if you just put some silicone down and throw some rocks on it, it's going to look messy. There's going to be gaps. So if you are going to do this, it does look nicer doing it one by one and taking that time to do that. But yeah, it's given it a bit of extra flair, extra colour, and yeah, enrichment for the snake. So they're all the rocks in place pretty much, ready to go. And it's starting to look nice. So now we're going to paint the outside of the enclosure. Because it's going to have no contact with the animal, you can have a little bit more freedom of what paint you use. And yeah, because you can see there's a lot of that exposed spray foam. It looks horrible. So if I've got glass enclosures like this, I do like to make sure I paint over it so you can't see that. And I actually put sticky tape around, I guess, the areas where I don't want paint to go. But as soon as I've painted that area, you rip the sticky tape off straight away. Because if the paint's set and then you rip it off, some of the paint's probably going to come along with it. But this is what it's starting to look like when it's all painted. So now it's really starting to have a bit more of a professional feel. It's covered up all that yucky spray foam that you don't want to see that'll distract you. But now I'm on my way to Jenny's orchid garden. This lady is absolutely amazing. The place is great. There are so many plants. You'll be in plant heaven if you're in Darwin and you go here. But Jenny was a great help. She helped me pick out plants. So knowledgeable. She knows every single plant. And if you love ferns, this is fern heaven. And ferns are a really good option because they're safe for, I guess, trickier species like lizards who could accidentally eat the plants. Whereas snakes, you've got a little bit more freedom with what you can put in your enclosure because they're not going to eat the plants. But you can see there's plants everywhere. This place, I was there for quite a while, just walking around. But this is a bromeliad I got from Jenny's orchid garden, and she picked that one out for me because it's got one sprouting. You can get them from Bunnings, which this one's from Bunnings. And I'm also putting a devil's ivy in there too, and I got this one from Bunnings. And a philodendron that I got from Jenny's orchid garden, and I think it's this one, the emerald green one. When she was telling me what type, but I sort of forgot. But now what we're doing is I'm removing all the plants from the pots and I'm going to wash all the soil off. And this is just going to make sure it's going to be safe. There's not going to be any of that plant food that could be harmful to your reptile. So you really want to make sure you thoroughly clean your plants off. Now we're doing the drainage layer. So I'm using some rocks and some fly screen. And this was just what I had lying around at home. You can make probably a better drainage layer than this. The clay balls work really well, egg crates. You could even use like a weed matting or another type of, I guess, screenage so the soil isn't going to go into that drainage layer. But this is, again, just what I had at home. So now this is what I'm using to make the soil for my bioactive enclosure, and it's got the amounts I'm using of each of these, so you can just follow that, screenshot that section for when you go to the shops. All those things you can get from Bunnings, besides the one that said Pet Barn on it. But now I did have some soil left over from bioactive enclosure I did a while ago and that I dismantled. But there you've got some springtails on that bit of bark there, so that's going in. And I'm putting some of that soil that was in there into this enclosure because those bugs have, the isopods as well, have munched down on leaves, bark, putting all nutrients in the soil. But here we go, now it's time to put all these gorgeous plants in. Now, this plant, it may be looking quite big at the moment. What I'm doing is I'm going to plant it in first, then I'm going to prune it back a little bit. But I really want this to look lush and filled with vegetation to provide Squiggle with a lot of security. It can hide amongst those leaves and it really replicates a canopy of a tree. But here we go, we're pruning this back a little bit. And we've put that devil's ivy in now as well. And I'm going to go out in the bush to collect some leaves. So this is just some bushland that's right near my house. You can't go wrong with eucalyptus leaves. They're in so many Australian reptiles' natural habitats. So I just went out, collected some leaves that naturally would sort of be in their habitats, and yeah, I'm just going to clean it up, rinse all the dirt off. We're going to wash it with some earth dishwashing liquid. Then we're going to rinse that off, and what we're going to do is we're going to boil it. So boil it for about 15 to 30 minutes max, and this is just going to kill any nasties, any hitchhikers, anything that can do any harm to your animal, and especially ants as well. So we're going to pop this on the stove, bring this to the boil. Once it's to the boil, give it a good stir, pop the lid on and let it simmer for about 15 minutes or so. And now we're going to drain it out, and if you are putting the leaves straight into your enclosure, drain it out and then rinse it with some cold water to cool the leaves down, because if you put boiling leaves in your enclosure, not only may it burn your hand when you're putting the leaves in your enclosure, it could harm those bugs, which are your cleanup crew that you've got in there, so just keep that in mind. But we're popping those cooled leaves in the enclosure now, and that's going to be the food for those bugs also. But this is the type of lighting I'm using. You can easily get that lighting from pet shops. So Pet Stock, if you're in Darwin, has that particular UVB light. This light though I had to order online. And I'm just checking to make sure they screw in and they work, and they do, which is great. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fill this water hole up, and I'm going to see if this waterfall works. And it does, and I'm pretty stoked about that. It would be, I guess, pretty terrible news if I turned it on and nothing happened, because that's the main feature of this build. So if you do this build, I really do hope your waterfalls work. And now it's time to get Squiggle out of his or her baby tub to have a little explore. Now, just keep in mind, Squiggle won't be going into this enclosure for about 2 or 3 months, because I want the plants to establish, the bugs to establish. I want to make sure all the plants are thriving, not dying. And again, this will just mean when Squiggle moves in, I know that everything is going to plan, everything's growing. The plants are going to be a little bit hardier if Squiggle does decide to move on them a little bit. And Squiggle loved this water hole. It was just drawn straight to it, so that running water really is attracting Squiggle. And yeah, Squiggle found the water source quite easily. Also, I did mention Squiggle is a green tree python, and you're probably thinking, why on earth is it yellow? Squiggle is a baby, so under a year old. When they do get to adults, so it could be between 6 months to a year and a half, they start to change colour into, most of the time, a vibrant green, but they can change into other colours as well. But there we go, one happy Squiggle. So thank you so much guys for watching this video. I hope it gave you a little bit of inspiration as to what you can build at home and the creations you can come up with to improve your scaly pet's quality of life. And again, you don't just have to do this style for green tree pythons, it could suit lots of species. But feel free to write in the comments below if you think you're going to use this design for any different species. And if you did find the video useful, please hit the thumbs up, it would really help our channel out. Subscribe if you'd like to be made aware of future content, but until then, we'll see you next time. Bye guys.